My name is Babak Fakhamzadeh. I'm one of the guys behind an app called Derive App, which is a tool to get lost in your own city. And it facilitates that by presenting the user with a series of task cards that basically nudge the user into experiencing his urban environment in a way differently from how you would normally do.
How did the idea for Derive come about?
Well, it's based on theoretical concepts that were pioneered in the 1950s and 60s by a bunch of leftist intellectuals and architects based in Paris. They were called the Situationist International, and they were very much agitating against the commoditization of society.
The spectacle.
Yeah, indeed, the spectacle. Instead of being, so they very much tried to nudge people from being consumers into actually participating more in their environment. And one of the ways in which they facilitated that, or in which they tried to achieve that, was by nudging people into looking at their environment differently, looking at their urban environment differently.
So how does the app work?
So it contains a series of task cards, little tasks, many of which are generic, and then some of which are specific to individual cities, that nudge you or ask you to look at your environment differently or to interact with your environment.
Give me a couple of examples of the generic ones.
Simple ones could be stuff like take the second street left, follow someone walking a dog, look up and compare what you see with the street you grew up in.
How did the ones that are not generic, the city-specific ones, how did those come about?
Yeah, most of them are created, or we create specific decks of cards that are city-specific. Typically, we create them in cooperation with, it can be a university or it can be an artists collective. And we then work with them through a workshop, typically, that lasts about 2 days, where maybe students or artists or interested parties, architects, whoever, we work with them to create task cards that are specific for the urban environment that these people are familiar with. Last year we started with a workshop in Abu Dhabi, in the United Arab Emirates, and we've since done workshops in upstate New York, in Johannesburg, here as well.
And here is Kampala.
Here in Kampala as well, yeah, indeed. Although the generic cards work in almost every setting, there are certain aspects of these individual cities that also can be captured in a unique way to those individual cities, and will allow users of those decks with cards to also then specifically experience these cities in a different way.
I want to describe it as an app, but it's not an app, is it?
Yeah, well, it depends how you define an app indeed. It's not an app that you download. Currently, it's not an app that you download from the App Store. It's a web-based app. Originally, we made a very conscious decision to go with the idea of a web-based app, because a web-based app works on every device with a browser. So because of that, we didn't have to create a separate app for the iOS platform. We didn't have to create a separate app for the Android platform, for BlackBerry and whatnot. It works on every device. And then specifically, if you want to go into app creation for Android, because the ecosystem is so extremely scattered, you end up not making one app. You end up making maybe 12 slightly different versions of apps that have to work on every device.
But you've given in, haven't you?
Yeah, a little bit we have. That is, well, we'd rather not, but yeah, we have found that people are so extremely used to downloading apps from an app store that an app store is the place where people go to start using a new app, that it seems that we don't really have a choice. We've had so often after we've introduced the app, whether it's at a conference or whether it's on a personal level, we explain it's a web-based app. You download it, you don't download it, you use your browser to start using it. So often we've then had these people come back and go like, oh, but I couldn't find it in the App Store. And it's like, no, it's a web-based app, we know. But
so how well used is the Derive?
It depends what your measurements for success are, but we've got in the past, in 2013, we had about 3,500 uses, and we have a combined tracked walked distance of about 1,250 kilometers, and about half the Derives are tracked. So that means that by implication,
you have to give your permission.
Yeah, you have to give your permission to the app for it to track your location. About half the users do that. So we've got about, which means by implication we've got maybe about 2,500 kilometers that were walked with the app.
Okay, and you're going to introduce various improvements to the app.
Yeah, that's correct. Already we've got a platform or a backend, if you will, that facilitates third parties that are interested to create their own decks. So these are individuals or organizations that are interested to expand the content that the app gives access to, separate from us, so we don't have to be involved. We give people access, or we give a group access, and they can build their own. We've had people do that in Egypt, for example, in Cairo, and in a few other places as well. And but we're going to take that quite a step further. We're going to, well, that's the intention. We're going to make it much more inclusive, where indeed individual users will also be able to contribute to the app in a much more, you could say in a much more generic way. So the what they will have at their disposal will be much more elaborate, really, which will allow, hopefully, the app to grow, or the contents of the app to grow much more than it has over the last year.